From the crushing depths of the ocean to the shadowy waters of the deep, these stories reveal moments of survival, terror, and the raw power of nature. Get ready for heart-pounding encounters with the ocean's deadliest predators, where the only thing more dangerous than the creatures is the unknown. Tina Ray, 26, had always been drawn to the sea. A marine biology student from Melbourne, she had spent years studying the creatures of the deep, particularly the ones that most people feared. The southern coast of Australia, wild and rugged, called to her like no other place. It was beautiful but dangerous, a stretch of coastline where cliffs rose like sentinels over kelp-choked coves, and the water ran cold and deep. That morning, the sky was overcast, casting a soft gray light over the glassy surface of the sea. Tina launched her bright red kayak from a hidden inlet, eager to spend the day observing marine life just beyond the kelp line. 100 meters inland, perched on a rocky ledge above the water, stood Jordan Ellis, 42, a local wildlife photographer who had come to the coast hoping to photograph a pod of dolphins known to pass through the area. He had seen Tina paddle out from the beach below. He didn't know her name then, but he admired the ease with which she moved across the water, her strokes steady, confident. She paused at the edge of the kelp forest and let the current carry her slightly farther out. Her kayak bobbed gently with the swell. He lifted his camera and zoomed in on her. There was something peaceful in the way she sat there, scanning the water, completely alone. Then she leaned over the side, peering into the depths, likely searching for fish or tracking something in the underwater forest. Jordan watched, lowering the camera slightly. He had seen others kayak here before, but something about her, young, focused, so clearly immersed in the world around her, held his attention longer than usual. The sea exploded. It happened without warning. 1 second, Tina's kayak floated in still water. The next, it was airborne, thrown violently upward by something massive and unseen. Jordan flinched, instinctively jerking the camera up to his face. Through the lens, he caught a glimpse of a dark gray blur, an immense form rising out of the water beneath the kayak. There was a thunderous splash, and the kayak split in two, its shattered plastic spinning through the air like confetti. Tina was flung skyward, limbs flailing. She was screaming. Jordan froze, disbelief pinning him to the ledge. Before she could even hit the water again, a shape burst upward from the foam, a great white shark, enormous beyond reason, its mouth open impossibly wide. It twisted mid-leap, and in one savage lunge it caught her in the air. The shark slammed back into the water with a crash, dragging her down in a whirl of spray and blood. The surface stilled too quickly, as if the sea had closed over her like a curtain. Jordan's camera slipped from his hands and hit the rocks. He stood motionless, eyes wide, scanning the sea for any sign she was still alive. The water churned red for a moment, then returned to its dark color. The only trace of her was a lone piece of kayak hull spinning slowly in the swell. He fumbled for his phone, hands shaking, and called emergency services, voice cracking as he tried to explain what he had just seen. The dispatcher asked him to repeat it twice. He kept watching the water. His eyes caught movement. At first he thought it might be her, but it wasn't. A dorsal fin cut the surface, long and slow, slicing through the water like a blade. The shark was still there, circling. It was massive, easily over 20 feet. It moved calmly with the confidence of something that had just dominated its world. Authorities arrived hours later. Helicopters swept the coastline. A drone was launched, and from high above it captured the shark still gliding through the same waters, undisturbed and unbothered. Tina's body was never recovered. Her life vest washed ashore, torn and bloodied. Pieces of her kayak littered the beach. Divers searched but found nothing else. The sea had taken her completely. Jordan gave his statement, detailing every moment as he remembered it. But retelling it didn't ease the horror. The image was burned into his mind. Her in the air. The shark beneath her, jaws wide like some prehistoric weapon, catching her before she could fall. It had been so fast, so precise. There had been no struggle. The sea had swallowed her in a single moment. Later he learned her name. Tina Ray, a marine biology student. A woman who had dedicated her life to understanding the very creature that took it from her. She had been studying the migration patterns of great whites, fascinated by their intelligence and dominance in the marine food chain. She had likely known the risks, but no one could anticipate that kind of ambush. Experts analyzed the attack and confirmed the shark's size, at least 23 feet. an apex predator in its prime. They believed it mistook the kayak for a seal from below, using its classic vertical ambush strategy. Once committed, the bite was terminal, a test, a strike. Not necessarily out of hunger, but curiosity and instinct sharpened over millions of years. The public reaction was divided. Some called for the shark to be hunted down. Others, especially marine scientists, urged restraint. They reminded everyone that Tina had gone to those waters, understanding the reality of the ocean. She had entered the predator's domain. It had acted as it was built to. Jordan stayed quiet through most of it, but he returned often to that ledge, unable to forget what he had seen. Weeks passed. The shark was sighted again. Same dorsal fin, same size. It moved along the kelp edge like a ghost. Some locals stopped going near the water. Others said the shark carried her spirit now, forever roaming the place where she was lost. A legend grew around the cove. Fishermen called it cursed. Tourists asked where it happened, but Jordan never showed them. He stopped taking photos of the sea. He would never forget the moment the ocean erupted. The way time slowed, the arc of her body through the air. The gaping mouth rose to meet her, the finality of that splash. He had seen many wild things in his career, but nothing came close to that moment. And nothing ever would, because that wasn't just a death. It was a vanishing. Ethan Clark, 35, had always chased the edges of the wild. A seasoned diver and amateur underwater photographer from Seattle, he had explored reefs from Indonesia to Belize, always drawn to the mysteries that lived where light faded and silence thickened. He wasn't a thrill seeker, at least not in the traditional sense. What pulled him below the surface was the alien stillness, the floating calm. It was control, beauty, the unknown. That night off the coast of Fiji, Ethan prepared for a solo night dive. He had been staying at a remote eco-lodge, and while others gathered around fires on the beach, he slipped into his wetsuit in near silence. The air was thick and warm, stars smothered by heavy clouds. The boat that dropped him off bobbed quietly 100 meters offshore. He descended slowly, flashlight beam slicing through the dark. His goal was to photograph bioluminescent plankton that lit up in ghostly swirls. He'd chosen this reef after hearing about a series of underwater caves and crevices teeming with life. He loved night dives. The darkness stripped the ocean of color, but made it more alive in other ways. Every shadow could move, every shape had potential. And on this night, something was already watching him. At 30 feet, Ethan hovered near the sandy bottom. He moved carefully, following the reef's jagged edge. He shone his light over brain coral and sea fans, waiting for the glowing plankton to react. Fish darted away from the beam. Crabs froze in the glare. The world felt hushed, as if waiting. Then he saw it. A shape emerged from the gloom, broad, smooth, and impossibly quiet. A tiger shark, at least 10 feet long, drifted into the edge of his light. Its stripes shimmered faintly, its massive head swinging slowly from side to side. It didn't charge, it didn't flee, it simply appeared. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He stayed still, muscles locked. He knew the species, opportunistic, curious, powerful. Not necessarily aggressive, but not predictable either. The shark circled once, keeping just beyond the brightest part of his flashlight beam. Ethan turned slowly, watching it, refusing to let it out of his sight. It moved like smoke effortlessly. His heart pounded in his chest, loud in his ears. But the shark moved on, it vanished into the dark. He floated there a moment longer. The water pressed in cold despite the wetsuit. The tension clung to him. He should have surfaced, but he wanted the shot. He moved deeper, descending into a narrow channel lined with overhangs and cave-like formations. He'd read about this place in a diver's forum, glowing pockets of plankton that needed darkness and silence to reveal themselves. He drifted into the narrow space and turned off his light for a few seconds to let his eyes adjust. As he waited, faint green pinpricks began to appear, trailing around him like dust in a sunbeam. He smiled behind his mask. Worth it. Then came the jolt. From behind, something struck him, hard and fast. He was spun forward and slammed into the cave wall. His flashlight clattered to the bottom. The light spun, beam slashing sideways across the reef. He kicked hard, instincts roaring to life, but something was already gripping his arm. A flash of agony tore through him as the teeth cut deep into muscle. The tiger shark had returned, and this time it wasn't curious. It shook him violently, pulling him against the jagged stone. His arm screamed with pain as his wetsuit shredded. He grabbed at his belt, fingers slick, and found his dive knife. With his other hand pinned in the shark's jaws, he swung the blade upward. The knife struck the shark's head once, twice. On the third strike, he hit the eye. The shark released him. It twisted in the narrow space, vanishing into the dark. Ethan kicked away, arm limp and streaming blood. The water turned murky, filled with clouded red and flaring light. He grabbed the flashlight and turned it toward the exit. No time to check the wound, no time to stop the bleeding. He had to get out. The surface felt impossibly far away. Every kick burned. His injured arm hung uselessly at his side. The light faded fast as he rose. Behind him, something moved. He could feel it. The water changed when something big passed through it, and he felt that pressure again. But the shark didn't strike a second time. He broke the surface, gasping, rolling onto his back as he pulled out his emergency whistle and flared his light. The boat was a speck. A figure waved, then shouted. Relief swelled in Ethan's chest, but so did something colder. Fear that the blood might draw the shark back, that it might breach the surface, jaws open again. He reached the boat, arms barely functioning. The crew hauled him on board. His wetsuit was in tatters, his arm a mess of slashes and punctures. Blood soaked the deck. The boat sped toward the shore, radio crackling with urgency. At the hospital, surgeons worked through the night to save the limb. Tendons were torn. The muscle was missing, but no arteries had been severed. The doctor said it was a miracle. Ethan didn't feel lucky. He felt changed, shaken in a way no surface dweller would ever understand. Experts later examined the incident. They believed the shark had initially been cautious, investigating the unfamiliar light and vibrations. But the confined cave environment, combined with the flashing camera rig and Ethan's movement, may have triggered a defensive or territorial response. Tiger sharks were unpredictable, especially in shadowy, narrow spaces. The footage on his camera, recovered and mostly intact, showed only glimpses of what had happened. A dark shape, a fast blur, then chaos. Ethan never dove alone again. He still filmed marine life, but always in pairs, always in open water. People asked him what it felt like to be bitten, to be that close to death. He never gave them the answer they wanted, because the truth was, it wasn't the pain that haunted him. It was the silence before the strike, the way the ocean swallowed sound and feeling until only the violence remained. It was the moment he realized that down there, in the dark, you are never the top of the food chain, and that sometimes beauty bites back. The sun blazed above the beach, its heat rippling the air like a furnace. The sand was scorching and the waves crashed in a rhythmic pattern, as if the ocean itself was keeping time with the pulse of the world. It was the perfect day for a beach volleyball match, and Marco was eager to make the most of it. A light breeze rolled in from the ocean, offering some relief from the midday heat as his friends set up the net. Marco was 25, fit and lean, with a competitive streak that could make any game feel like a battle for his life. He grinned as he slapped his palms together, the excitement palpable in his eyes. His friends laughed and joked around him as they divided into teams. It was just another casual game, just another day spent in the sun, far from the worries of the world. The beach was crowded, filled with tourists and families enjoying the vibrant, sunlit afternoon. But Marco barely noticed them. His focus was on the game, on the ball, on spiking it over the net with as much force as he could muster. He served first, sending the ball flying with a powerful swing. The game quickly picked up speed, and with each hit, the stakes seemed to rise. Marco's team was ahead, laughing as they made an impressive series of shots. His friend Sarah, a sprightly 24-year-old woman with sharp eyes, challenged him at every turn. She was fast, competitive, and one of the best players he'd ever faced, even in casual games. But Marco was determined to win today, perhaps as much to prove something to himself as to anyone else. They played for hours, the game heating up under the fierce sun. Sweat glistened on Marco's back and the salty ocean air clung to his skin. He felt alive in the moment, his movements fluid, his body pushing to its limits. He spiked the ball with an aggressive jump, laughing as Sarah lunged for it but missed. His team cheered, but as the game progressed, Marco found himself drawn to the water. The waves seemed inviting, cooling and comforting after the match's intensity. The ball bounced off the sand, carrying further out into the surf, and Marco immediately dashed toward the ocean to retrieve it. Sarah laughed as she followed him. Marco's bare feet pounded the hot sand as he sprinted into the shallow water, the coolness of the waves washing over his ankles. He swam out further, diving under the breaking waves to chase the ball. The current tugged at him, pulling him farther from the shore with each stroke. But as he reached for the ball, something shifted beneath the surface. The water, once clear and inviting, grew darker. Marco's chest tightened with an uneasy sensation he couldn't shake. He had swum out this far before, but today something felt different. The waves seemed louder, the water colder. He pushed it from his mind, focusing on the ball. Just as his fingers brushed the ball, a sudden rush of pressure gripped his legs. Marco froze. His heart skipped a beat as his instinct screamed at him to swim back to shore. He turned his head just in time to see a massive dorsal fin cutting through the water with terrifying precision. It was too close. A massive bull shark surged upward, its mouth opening wide as it lunged for him. The force of the strike sent Marco flying through the water, his legs gripped in the shark's jaws like a vice. Panic surged in his chest as the shark's teeth sank deep into his flesh. The ocean swallowed his scream as the pain shot through him in jagged waves. Instinct took over. Marco kicked, his arms flailing wildly, trying to free himself from the shark's grip. He felt its massive body thrash around him, its powerful tail sweeping the water into a frenzy. His legs were locked in the predator's grip, the crushing pressure almost unbearable as it began dragging him further out. Everything happened in a blur. The world around him spun as he was pulled deeper, away from the safety of the shore. His friends on the beach were shouting, but the rushing water drowned out their voices. Sarah screamed from the shoreline, but Marco's focus was solely on surviving. His body went into shock, his muscles failing to respond, his vision beginning to blur from the shock. He kicked again, desperate. He reached for anything he could grasp, anything to break free. His hands grasped at the water, at the shark's sleek, rough skin. But it was futile. Every time he tried to move, the shark responded by tightening its grip, dragging him down. The shark jerked, a violent motion that felt like his bones might snap. He fought back, flailing against the water, trying to break free from the vice-like grip of its jaws. His body was on autopilot, his mind screaming at him to survive. His foot made contact with the shark's side. For a split second it loosened its grip. But then the shark twisted violently, dragging Marco down with it. He was no longer in control. The water seemed to close over him, cold and suffocating. The world became a swirling mess of dark water, blood, and pain. He kicked once more, but the force of the shark's attack dragged him farther under. It was over. There was no escape. His lifeless body was pulled deeper into the depths, the water clouding around him. On the shore, Sarah stood frozen, her hands still stretched out as if she could reach him, as if the moment could be stopped, reversed. She could hear nothing now, only the pounding of her own heart. She screamed again, but the sound seemed to vanish into the vastness of the ocean. She ran toward the water, but it was too late. The others on the beach had already dialed the authorities. The frantic energy in the air was palpable, but there was nothing they could do about it. The shark had struck and Marco was gone. The beach was thrown into chaos. Police arrived, helicopters circled, and divers were sent to search the waters. But the ocean had taken what it wanted. Hours passed, but Marco's body was never found. The shark had taken him into the deep, leaving only a few fleeting traces behind, bits of clothing, torn flesh, and the indelible memory of his final, violent struggle. In the days that followed, the resort and the surrounding beach were closed. Tourists were escorted away. The ocean, once a place of peace and beauty, had become a dangerous reminder of nature's raw power. A bull shark, once a myth in the stories told around bonfires, was now a real threat, lurking somewhere in the depths, waiting for its next victim. And as for Sarah, the image of Marco's desperate final fight would haunt her forever. No one could take the terror she had witnessed, the sound of the ocean swallowing him whole. The beach would never be the same again. The sea had taken him. The ocean off the coast of Oregon was wild. It was the kind of place where the sea seemed endless, stretching into the horizon like a gray expanse of uncertainty. Alex Moore, 29, had fished these waters his entire life. But that didn't mean he ever took the ocean lightly. The unpredictable tides, the relentless pull of the currents, and the deep, cold water all spoke to the raw power of the sea. Alex had learned to respect the hard way. On this particular morning, Alex and his small crew set out early aboard their fishing boat. a modest vessel designed for deep-sea expeditions. The air was sharp and cool as they navigated through the fog. The water was eerily still, the kind of calm that made you feel like something was waiting beneath. The crew worked together, their tasks routine and well-practiced. Alex was the first mate, guiding the others as they set out their lines. A calm but focused man, he took pride in his work. Their target that day was halibut, prized for its size and value. But something was off about the day. There was a weight in the air, a sense that the ocean was holding its breath. Alex noticed it first, a sudden shiver in his gut, but he dismissed it. Fishermen were often overly cautious, and he wasn't one to give in to superstitions. As the boat drifted further from the coast, the fog thickened, shrouding everything in a damp gray mist. The boat's engine hummed steadily as Alex leaned over the edge, his hands working to reel in the lines. His crewman Tom stood nearby, adjusting the gear. The ocean around them felt oppressive, as if the fog had swallowed up all sound, leaving nothing but the distant murmur of waves. It was when Alex bent over the side to check the bait that he first saw it, a shadow in the water. He froze. It moved slowly beneath the surface, a dark, ominous shape gliding silently through the murk. Alex's heart skipped a beat. His eyes narrowed and instinct kicked in. The size of the shape was unmistakable. It was big, far too big for anything in the area, especially this close to the boat. At first he thought it was a whale or perhaps a giant sea lion. But something about the shape felt wrong. There was a smoothness to it, a predatory elegance. It was a shark, massive, unmistakable, and circling. Tom didn't hear when Alex called his name. The engine roared to life as the captain adjusted the throttle, but Alex didn't take his eyes off the shadow. The shark was moving toward them, its sleek body cutting effortlessly through the water. It didn't rush. It didn't seem particularly interested in the boat. It just circled. But that was enough. In these waters, circling could mean one thing. Alex called again, more forcefully this time. Tom turned, his face a mixture of curiosity and confusion. He followed Alex's gaze. Tom asked what was happening. Before Alex could answer, the shape surged upward, rising from the depths like a missile. It was a great white, its massive body almost half the length of the boat. Its enormous head broke the surface with a terrifying force, mouth wide, teeth glistening in the pale light. Alex screamed, his voice raw with panic as the shark slammed into the boat, sending a shockwave of violent motion through the hull. The impact was deafening. The boat lurched under the force of the strike, the wood groaning, the engine sputtering as the shark made another pass, this time brushing against the side. Its sheer size was overwhelming. Alex staggered back, his heart hammering in his chest as the shark circled again. It was testing them, circling closer, its dorsal fin cutting the surface like a knife. Alex's mind raced. He could feel the tension building in his muscles as adrenaline pumped through his veins. The shark wasn't attacking, but it wasn't backing off either. It was toying with them, its massive body rolling in the water with casual ease. Alex whispered to himself to stay calm, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to convince Tom or himself. The shark made another pass, this time striking the boat again, harder. And this time it wasn't just the boat rocking. A splintering sound echoed through the air as the shark's teeth scraped the hull, leaving visible gouges in the wood. The ship groaned under the pressure and Alex's heart skipped a beat. It was too much. If it hit again like that, the boat would be at risk of capsizing. Tom scrambled to pull the lines up, his hands shaking. The boat was now rocking with each movement of the shark, the creaking of the wood making the situation feel even more unstable. Alex watched the shark as it made another slow pass. It was no longer circling. It was preparing for something, and Alex knew it wasn't just a random encounter anymore. The vibrations had drawn the shark away from the fishing lines and the thrashing fish, and it was now testing its prey. The shark lunged again, but this time Alex was ready. He grabbed the closest weapon, a gaff hook, and swung it with all his might, trying to ward off the predator. The shark's eyes gleamed, almost calculating as it twisted and darted away at the last moment, narrowly avoiding the hook. Alex shouted, pushing Tom toward the safety of the boat's interior. Tom hesitated, eyes wide with fear, but Alex's urgency made him move. He climbed into the cabin, peeking out through the window, and Alex followed him, keeping his eyes on the water. They watched as the shark continued to circle. It wasn't giving up. The massive predator moved with terrifying grace, its every movement sending shivers down their spines. But strangely, it didn't make another attack. After what felt like an eternity, the shark gave one final pass, its body moving slowly beneath the boat as it descended into the depths. The tension in the air loosened, but only slightly. Alex didn't let his guard down. He kept his eyes trained on the water, waiting for another strike, but it never came. The shark had vanished. It wasn't until an hour later, as they finally made their way back to shore, that Alex's body began to shake uncontrollably. He wasn't sure if it was the cold, the terror, or the fact that the shark had almost breached the boat, but the adrenaline was fading and reality was starting to set in. He had just come face to face with one of the ocean's most dangerous creatures, and survived. Back at the dock, the crew members were waiting. They were eager to hear about the day's catch, but when they saw Alex's pale face and the strained look in his eyes, they knew something was wrong. Alex realized they had been lucky. He had survived an encounter with one of nature's most formidable predators, but he would never forget the cold, calculating eyes of the shark, or the way it had circled silently, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. The cave system off Florida's coast was a photographer's paradise, or at least it was supposed to be. Julia Meeks, 32, a professional underwater photographer known for her striking images of marine life, had dived into these caves countless times. Her dive had started as planned. Julia was in the water alone, her breathing steady through the regulator, her body lithe and efficient as she glided through the narrow passageways. She had come to capture the glowing plankton that flourished in the caves, their bioluminescence creating an ethereal glow in the dark water. She moved with grace, the underwater world unfolding around her as she set up her camera for a long exposure shot. The faint blue-green light cast everything in an otherworldly glow. Julia had been diving for over a decade, but even she couldn't ignore the growing tension in the water. The currents were stronger today, and the water was less clear than usual. It wasn't uncommon for things to shift in these caves, hidden pockets of current, sudden drops in temperature, but this felt different. She shook it off, focusing on the shot in front of her. She had a job to do, and she wasn't about to let anything distract her. But as she floated motionless, the silence grew heavy, and something wasn't right. The murky water around her seemed to thicken, almost as if it were closing in. Julia adjusted her position, trying to steady her breath as she aimed her camera. She couldn't help but feel a sense of unease creeping up her spine, the kind of feeling you get when you're being watched. But she told herself it was nothing, just the natural anxiety that comes with diving in these murky waters. Then she felt it.
A sudden jolt from behind. It was subtle at first, just a brush against her flippers, a slight disturbance in the water. Her heart skipped a beat, but she dismissed it quickly. It was probably a fish, a passing stingray maybe. She was used to the movements of creatures around her, but then it happened again, this time stronger. Julia whipped around, her heart pounding in her chest, and that's when she saw it. A shadow. It moved quickly and her pulse spiked as it emerged from the gloom. The shape was massive, long and sleek, its movements quick and calculated. Julia's breath caught in her throat as she realized what it was. A bull shark, its eyes locked onto hers, dark and unreadable, and she froze. The shark moved with terrifying purpose, its body slicing through the water with a fluidity that seemed unnatural. It circled her once, its enormous form gliding in a tight arc, then disappeared back into the murk. Julia's mind raced. Bull sharks were known to be aggressive, territorial, and unpredictable. In these confined, dark spaces, they were even more dangerous. She knew she had to keep calm, but her instincts were screaming at her to flee. Her hand instinctively reached for her camera, her fingers trembling. She didn't want to startle the shark, but the shot she could capture, if she lived to tell the tale, was worth more than anything she had ever shot. But there was no time. The shark was back, and it was faster this time, darting out of the darkness with an explosive burst of movement. It struck, its teeth flashing white in the dim light. The impact was swift, a violent collision that sent Julia spinning in the water. The shark's powerful jaws clamped down on her shoulder, its teeth sinking into the thick wetsuit material, but not deep enough to reach her skin. Yet, she gasped, fighting to regain control of her spinning body. The shock of the initial strike left her momentarily disoriented, but survival instincts kicked in. Julia kicked hard, pushing herself away from the shark with all her strength, her legs thrashing in the water. She reached for her dive knife, strapped to her thigh, but the water around her had turned into a whirlpool of confusion. The shark circled again, its eyes now wide with predatory focus, its movements methodical. She had to get out. But the cave system was too tight, the walls pressing in on her. There was no easy escape, no open water to flee to. She was trapped, and the shark knew it. It darted in again, coming from the right this time, a flash of silver and muscle. Julia barely had time to react. She swung the dive knife in a desperate wide arc, the blade grazing the shark's side. The shark recoiled momentarily, but it didn't retreat. Instead, it pressed closer, its body a shadow of menace in the murk. The water around Julia churned with the violence of the encounter. Her heart raced, each beat echoing in her ears as she fought to stay calm. The shark lunged again, its jaws closing on her shoulder once more, this time sinking deep into the wetsuit. The pain was sharp and immediate, but Julia's training kicked in. She twisted her body violently, breaking free from the shark's grip and managing to turn her back to the wall of the cave. Her vision was blurred from the shock, and blood, her own, clouded the water. She felt the warmth of it trickling down her arm, but there was no time to assess the damage. The shark, undeterred, circled again, faster this time. Julia could feel its presence in the water, could feel its cold gaze on her, even through the murky haze. It was waiting, sizing her up, perhaps looking for an opening. In that moment, Julia made a choice. She had to make it out. She had to survive. With a final burst of adrenaline, Julia kicked hard toward the small gap in the cave's wall she had seen earlier. The shark followed, but it was slower now, perhaps surprised by her sudden movement. She reached the narrow gap and wedged herself into it, squeezing her body into the tight opening, trying to push herself further into the dark tunnel. The shark hit the wall behind her, its force sending a shock of vibration through the water. For a few seconds, the world was silent. Julia stayed perfectly still, her breath shallow and controlled, praying the shark would lose interest. The water was thick with blood now, and she knew it wouldn't be long before the shark came back. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the shark seemed to vanish into the darkness. It wasn't until she could no longer hear the shark's movements that she edged her way out of the gap and made her way toward the exit, her legs weak but still functional. By the time Julia surfaced, the first light of dawn was breaking through the cave's entrance. Her dive team, frantic with worry, helped her out of the water. Her shoulder was torn and she was bleeding heavily, but she was alive. Her dive team rushed her to the hospital, where surgeons were able to save her arm. The kelp forests off California's coast were a world of shadows and soft green sways, teeming with life, where every turn revealed something new. Lucas Walker, 28, was an experienced diver who had been drawn to the ocean's mysteries for as long as he could remember. On this night dive, he wasn't hunting for treasures or chasing elusive creatures. His goal was simple: document the behavior of fish with a powerful underwater flashlight. The water was cold and dark as expected, but the flashlight's beam cut through the blackness, casting an eerie glow on the kelp that danced with the movement of the current. Lucas had been diving for over an hour, photographing schools of fish and taking note of their patterns. He had seen sharks in these waters before, but they were usually just shadows, darting in and out of the beam. He didn't think much of them. That was until the beam of light shifted. Lucas swept the flashlight across a rocky outcrop, capturing the swirling movement of fish when he noticed something odd, a large dark shape gliding just beyond the beam. For a moment, he thought it was just the current playing tricks on his eyes. But then the shape came closer, a great white shark, its massive body moving with unnerving precision. It was over 15 feet long, its dorsal fin cutting through the water like a sharp blade. Lucas froze, his heart racing. The shark's eyes locked onto the light. For a split second, Lucas thought the shark would swim away, but it didn't. Instead, it moved closer, almost as if drawn to the beam of light. The shark seemed confused but curious. It glided slowly, almost lazily, like it was stalking its prey. Lucas didn't dare move, unsure of what the shark might do next. The attack was a blur, fast and brutal. Its jaws opened wide, snapping at the beam of light, mistaking it for prey. Lucas had only a moment to react. The flashlight was yanked from his hands, the shark's powerful bite tearing through the water as it lunged at the source of light. The force of the bite sent Lucas tumbling backward, spinning in the water. His heart hammered in his chest as panic set in. The shark's teeth barely missed him, its enormous jaws snapping just inches from his legs. The water around him churned violently, bubbles rising like a storm. He struggled to regain his bearings, disoriented by the powerful surge. The shark was no longer just a curious observer. It was actively hunting, its massive form circling again, eyes fixed on him. The beam of light was gone, but the shark was still there, circling, sizing him up as though trying to decide if he was worth the chase. Lucas kicked hard, pushing himself backward. His fins barely caught the current as he moved toward a patch of kelp, hoping to find cover. But the shark followed, gliding with effortless speed through the water. His mind raced. He couldn't outrun it. His only chance was to make himself look as unthreatening as possible, to avoid triggering its hunting instincts. He knew that sharks didn't often attack unless provoked, But that didn't mean they wouldn't. Lucas's breath was ragged in his regulator as he slowly backed into the kelp, hoping it would offer some protection. The shark was getting closer now, its massive body looming in the dark water. It circled once, twice, moving with an eerie patience. Lucas's heart pounded in his chest, his body frozen, waiting. Then just as suddenly as it had appeared, the shark stopped. It hovered for a moment, its eyes watching, and for a split second Lucas thought it might turn away. But the silence stretched on, the tension unbearable. And then, without warning, the shark darted away into the darkness, vanishing as quickly as it had come. Lucas stayed motionless for several long moments, trying to steady his breath. It was over. Lucas slowly surfaced, gasping for air as the dark ocean water gave way to the first hints of dawn. His heart was still racing, his mind trying to process the close call. The shark had only been reacting to the light. It wasn't hunting him. It had been drawn to the flash of movement, thinking it was prey. But the encounter had left him shaken. In that moment, Lucas realized how close he had come to death, and how easy it was for the ocean to remind you that it was still in control.